Welcome back to TTC. This is the Milwaukee M18 2724 leaf blower, which up until now has been Milwaukee's only brushless leaf blower. We started testing leaf blowers last time there were leaves on the ground with several brands, which I'm sure we could add to, but up until now hadn't included this red brand because, well, this one's not exactly known for being a home run effort by Milwaukee. Many of our viewers in the comments section saying as much as well. It's a $199 leaf blower rated for 120 miles per hour and 450 CFM. Pretty bang on tit for tat with the also 18 volt Makita we've tested coming in at 116 and 159 CFM. So we aim to test those claims to see what's what and why one might be better than another, then take this M18 and its newer brother apart to try and glean even more from that, and finally rank them to total our findings. And speaking of its new brother, that would be the 2824-20 Milwaukee. Hadn't had this kind of unpacking experience since our 1-inch D handle, so already expecting a lot from this one. And you'd hope so too, just looking at the numbers. That $199 goes up to $299 now. For the bare tool, 120 mile per hour gets upgraded to 145, and 450 CFM becomes 600. And how are they able to pump up the numbers this much? Well, this is the first handheld tool Milwaukee has introduced that uses two M18 batteries. Basically an M36 sort of situation, I believe, and we'll be taking it apart to confirm, though they're a bit bashful about saying so. Way back when Makita introduced the 18x2 line of tools, Milwaukee was public about staying steadfast to their 18 volt designs, instead introducing high output 21700 cell batteries. And now years later, the M18 lawnmower is a thing, and even the new M18x2 shop vacs utilizing two high output batteries, and you can only use two at a time, implying that 36 volts. Of course, these are push around tools carrying around their own weight, so maybe that's what Milwaukee had in mind with their dual battery systems. That is until this new 2824 turns that theory on its head and signals, we think you can and should carry around two high output batteries at a time, meaning it's possible we'll see this configuration popping up in all kinds of heavy duty M18 tools. But first we want to see if the juice is worth the squeeze on your biceps and your wallet. Is this new M36, as it were, that much better to justify Milwaukee going back on their word and coming out with an 18x2 platform? Let's find out. Another thing that implies 36 volt is we use several different charge level batteries here, and it always displays roughly the same charge level of the lowest battery, meaning once it drains one, the other still having some charge doesn't mean much. And that ramp up time, they say it's about half a second, and I believe it. Instead of having a high and a low setting like the first gen, the second gen model has a slider switch, which I found proves super useful. Let's check out the stated performance of these models first. The Gen 1 here, M18, is using an HD 12.0 to give it its best shot, sort of, and to match the watt hours we'll be comparing to on the Gen 2. If you're wondering what this thing is, it's called a pitot tube. See our first leaf blower vid on it. It's basically measuring airspeed and air volume with high accuracy and a higher range than traditional wind speed anemometers. So the Gen 1's seeing 95 miles per hour, not exactly the 120 they're advertising. Low is 65 miles per hour, which we found to not be useful for too many things, really just dusting things off. The next step is CFM, which uses a formula based on the outlet diameter of the tube, which here is 3.07 inches as we measured it. So it sees about 431 CFM, which didn't change when moved away from the floor on either tool really, just checking that out. Let's see the new M36 type blower now. We're using two XE 6.0s here simply because we want to compare directly with the same 12 amp hours total on the first gen, but we'll give you some more data coming up on other batteries. Airspeed test is up first. So 119 miles per hour or so, and here showing how close you can get with the probe. Doesn't really change too much, still 119 miles an hour, though we try to keep things in the 4 to 5 inches range. So for air volume, this Gen 2 has a 3.2 inch inside diameter on the exit. And that's 584, it spikes at 585 CFM. but maybe that 119 miles per hour can be improved with the included nozzle. So 124 miles per hour, just 4 to 5 mile an hour improvement. But that nozzle is much smaller of an exit, just 2.8 inches. And that smaller exit makes for just 466 CFM, a huge loss from 585. Likely not worth it unless you need to get closer to the ground for what you're doing. One last thing we wanted to check out is what happens if you mix up batteries, like throwing an XC 5.0 here in the mix, or using just XC 5.0s, or mixing in an HD 12.0 really, or half-charged batteries, in all cases the same 119 miles per hour to sometimes peaking at 120. Pretty cool considering how high draw these tools are that you can really use any batteries you want, same performance. Let's take a look at the ranking now that we have some findings to total. Due to using 2 batteries, and this is with either XC 6.0s or 8.0s, the dual battery Milwaukee is quite heavy, 10.8 pounds as tested. The Gen 1 with equal watt hours at 8.3 pounds though. That means these start off in the red with negative 83 and negative 108 points off the bat. The Gen 1 made as much as 95 miles per hour and 431 CFM. On this ranking that makes for 190 and 144 points. That 95 miles per hour is just 79% of their airspeed claim, the lowest we've seen from a blower of any brand so far, even Amazon names. The CFM though seems pretty close, 96%, 96 points. The Gen 2 is basically better everywhere, 240 and 195 points here for those figures, tied with the highest mile per hour blower we've tested so far, the Greenworks here, but bringing a lot more CFM than that. In fact, a lot more CFM than the lower airspeed Ego up here. Definitely need to purchase some top of the range Ego and Ryobi 40 volt to be sure, but still looking quite good. That makes for 83% in speed, could have been higher here, and 98% in CFM. Now our ranking chart looks a little different than last time, with this subjective score now totaling for up to 200 points instead of 300, as we don't always have enough leaves on the ground to do side-by-side comparisons year round, but these values are still in relation to those original ones you saw. Cordless leaf blowers though, those can be rough on runtime seemingly regardless of that battery size. Let's check that out next. The Gen 1 M18 was a bit of a shocker. It keeps the airflow across the run better than most, which is good. But even with its HD 12.0 battery, plummets at 9 minutes. That's crazy. Under 10 minutes and 12 amp hours dead. Almost under 9 minutes, really. That's insane. I think this is legitimately the quickest way to drain an HD 12.0 period. A heat gun would last twice this time. Online, we were reading everywhere from 15, 20, 25 minutes with a 9 and 8 amp hour battery. This tool only has 2 speeds and no turbos, so are these all being reviewed just in low? Just to give you some perspective, this is the largest battery we've ever used in this category watt hour wise, and yet it's the shortest runtime of anything we've tested as well. It just eats batteries. Now the Gen 2 on the other hand, well, let's take a look. Definitely making more airspeed and volume, so that's using up some juice, but still lasts longer on the same total watt hours, 12 minutes instead of 9 or 1/3 longer, and it keeps that performance basically 100% until it stops, which is, that's cool. With 2 XC 8.0s or 16 amp hours total, something the Gen 1 can't accomplish, it was also no surprises lasting 15 minutes and 40 seconds, or almost exactly proportionally longer than those 6 amp hours. Now, is 16 minutes a long time? Well, no, but in cordless leaf blowers, it's a rough crowd. We'll put the XC 8.0 version of the Gen 2 on the ranking here, as that's what it does best with. That's a 9 for the Gen 1 and a 16 for the dual amp hour battery, or 18 and 36 points. And the median mile per hour across this runtime was 90 for this, and 119 here. Basically, this one stays at 119 miles per hour the whole run. The total watt hour tested for these tools are also record breaking, even with some 56 and 80 volt tools up here in the bunch. That's 216 for the HD 12.0 and 288 for the 2 XC 8.0s. Though those watt hours from Milwaukee, as you're probably not surprised, don't come cheap. That makes these tools total as tested $449 and $528. Using a rake is looking better and better by the second, right? A 2-pack of XE 8.0s right now being slightly cheaper for some reason than 2 XE 6.0s, so the 8.0 configuration showing best for this blower at the moment, 35 and 37 points as a function of price and performance. So let's see how loud these are. With the decibel meter set at ear height and holding these tools sort of where you would, the Gen 1 is quite loud, switching back and forth between 91.5 decibels. We're going to call that 90. The dual battery is more high-pitched, but also about 88 decibels. Some of the reason for that might be due to their inner workings of the tools. Inside the Gen 1, we find the fan and motor contained in this cylinder, and the motor is 2.4 inches in diameter. Inside the new $300 model, we find a foam shroud around the cylinder with vent cutouts on that cylinder. Not sure, but this could help out with both vibration and some of that noise. The motor housing is also 2 inches in diameter now, so a smaller motor, which is putting out a lot more air, I'm sure helped by being 36 volts in architecture. Now sure, 36 volts is not inherently more powerful. Amps are amps and volts are volts, they don't correlate directly. But it does come with some advantages and efficiencies, otherwise Milwaukee wouldn't have gritted their teeth and given in to this dual battery configuration. The wiring on the motor appears to be 14 gauge on the Gen 1, and a smaller or thinner 16 gauge on the Gen 2. The sensor wires in particular are tiny, leading into this epoxy-filled aluminum slug, and the aluminum on the Gen 1 is very much designed as a heat sink, and I'm pretty sure I understand why. It's probably absolutely fire hosing heat out of this thing all the time. And yes, the Gen 1 operates at 16.5, 17, 17.5 volts under load as we've tested, normal stuff. Apologies for the camera frame rate not really playing nice with the display on this, but we've also measured 34, 33, 35 volts coming from the Gen 2 at full beans, confirming that the batteries are indeed not in parallel but in series like we and probably many of you correctly assumed. Now from us, the M18 Gen 1 gets a 140 out of 200 for its performance score. At least for now, it's not fall yet, but a Makita 18 volt does pretty much everything this does, just faster, a little more power, quieter, and lighter. And with that similar performance, it lasts longer on a battery less than half the size. Some immense inefficiencies in this model killing a battery this quick. I can see why some people aren't raving about it, even though for some it may be doing tasks okay. The Gen 2 dual battery gets a 185 from us. It's noticeably better than anything else I've used, so I feel that's good for at least a 10-point gap over this other model here. The super quick ramp up time is quite nice in small yards, changing your direction often, and it just puts out a lot of air. So that totals 803 and 1005, putting the Gen 1 in last so far. We do try to rank these with their best scoring configuration, but even with an XE 8.0, with the cost and weight savings, it makes again exactly 803 here. The M36 flavor moves into first though. Besides some weight and well, yeah, a lot of price if you don't already own these two batteries, the model does every single one of these things better. Quite a huge gap they've leaped going from 18 to 36 volt, and a few years of development, of course. If you're not already a Milwaukee owner, there's probably some very decent outdoor power equipment kits that you can buy that might give this model a run for its money. Recommend those for us to buy below. But if you do own a couple XE 6.0s, 8.0s, this new 2824 model is a massive step up from the current M18 offering. I'm glad they are willing to step outside of their 18 volt comfort zone and make a meaningful and seemingly much needed improvement. Thanks for watching.